Hello everyone and welcome to a wonderful game that made possible a wonderful achievement. It is Quang Liem versus Gukesh, and you guys already know by now that Gukesh broke 2700 and he is the third or rather fourth youngest ever to achieve such a feat, but we are going to discuss this after we check out the game. What we are interested in how he did this, because Quang Liem is an incredibly strong Grandmaster. He's over 2700 for quite some time now. He's very established and crossing this barrier by beating such a strong player is definitely something to check out, and the game is really awesome. So let's dive straight into it, and then we're going to discuss a little bit more. So here Le opens with c4. He goes for the English opening. We have e6, knight to c3, d5 now, the Agincourt defense, but d4 and transposing into the queen's gambit declined. Knight to f6, we have c captures on d5, e captures on d5, and now bishop to g5, nicely developing the bishop, and now bishop to b4. Here, the absolute main line is bishop to e7, but you can't really expect to be the Grandmaster of Les level, playing only main lines. So bishop to b4, this is far trickier, and now pawn to e3. We have h6 challenging the bishop, asking do you want to capture or do you want to go back, and then I further harass the bishop. Bishop to h4, g5 now, bishop to g3, and now a nice knight to e4 with pressure on the c3 knight. So rook to c1 defending, and now we have h5, just preparing to trap the bishop. H4 will do so because after bishop to e5, f6, and there is no more square for this bishop to retreat to. So f3, you could also play h3, seems like it's possible because you can hide the bishop, but then we just trade everything, and it's just a very weird position to have with white, with the pawn structure being so shattered. You would not have a good time playing this. So instead, after h5, we have f3, forcing the knight to move. Knight captures on g3, h captures, and now just a nice c6, defending the pawn on d5. And here, white can't really be too happy with his position. Black is the one dictating the tone of the battle, but Les says this is perfectly fine. So bishop to d3, and now there is one game where bishop to d6 was played. Also bishop to e6 is a known move. It's rather from a famous game. Я не помню, she had this position against Ryazantsev in 2018 in the Mark Dvoretsky Memorial. Nepo won this game after this bishop to e6 idea. But here we have knight to d7, and it is now as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Le goes about this. He pushes g4. Makes sense. Of course, the pawn cannot capture, the rook would hang, so the pawn is advanced to h4, and now g3. Further challenging this structure, but now queen to e7. Gukesh says, but your king is still in the center of the board. So king to d2, defending the pawn this way, and at some point we are hoping to bring our king to b1 and sort of artificially castle. Knight to b6, and now pawn to a3. Pushing the bishop back, bishop to d6, going after the pawn here, but now just g captures on h4. We have g captures and pawn to f4, and you can see that white has a very nice control of the center here with the pawns. However, he does have a backwards e3 pawn, and he already gave Gukesh a passed h pawn. So bishop to d7, Gukesh now ready to castle queenside, and queen to f3. Defending the pawn, and now of course we want to hide our king all the way to b1. We have queenside castles, and here comes pawn to f5. Now interestingly, this seems like Gukesh blundered the d5 pawn, but it's actually beautiful what happens if you capture this pawn. If you go for the pawn, yes, okay, the rook controls the c file, but after knight captures and queen captures, there's bishop to b4 check. You sacrifice the bishop, and after, or you don't, but it doesn't really matter, but after captures and captures with check, there is no good move with the king. If you go to a light square, d1 or e2, we just pick up this pawn with check, and we pick up the white queen, so that's out of the question. And another thing, if you block with the rook, it's not much better. We can just pick up a pawn, and once the rook blocks again, or even the bishop blocks, we're still just gonna give up the queen for the rook. We remove the rook, so the c pawn is no longer pinned, and once the king captures, we pick up the queen, and now we're up the exchange and just have a completely winning position. The pass pawns are everywhere. This is completely winning for Gukesh. So that's his idea. He did not blunder a pawn here, if you guys are wondering. So here we have f5, preparing further further pushing of the pawns with the g5 and g6. King to b8, just for good measure, getting rid of that king from the c file, and now knight to h3. We have c5, very principled move by Gukesh, also the absolute strongest, if you ask the engine, and it makes sense. The white king is in the center of the board, it makes sense to open up the center. But now f6, attacking the queen, queen to f8, and now pawn to g5. So at some point, of course, Le is hoping to push g6, f captures, and then f7, and then he's extremely close to promotion. So rook to g8, stopping g6 for the moment, and king to c2. Now we have time to hide our king all the way to b1. C captures on d4, e captures, and rook to c8, but now just king to b1. And even though this is by far the strongest move white can play, and you definitely should play this, black's position is still much better, but only if you find that one move that actually gives black the advantage, where you can even hope to push this for a win. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find this wonderful idea while I give you a couple of seconds. And you have to find it if you want to become the fourth youngest 2700 Grandmaster ever. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding the bishop grab, but not this one. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is bishop captures on a3. Bishop captures on h3 is also interesting, as you remove the defender of the g5 pawn, but it is not nearly as impressive as bishop captures on a3. And the problem here is that the bishop cannot be captured. It's just a free pawn. If you capture the bishop, then queen captures on a3, and now you have problems. Your knight is hanging here, the knight is coming to a4, with some checkmating threats. For example, if let's say knight a2, we're going to play knight a4, threaten checkmate, and once the white queen helps out with the defense of this check, queen back to d2, we can just play rook captures on c1, and that's it. Now we win our material back. If queen captures, we're gonna capture the bishop here. If the rook captures, then we pick up the knight on h3, so there really isn't all that much you can do. And of course, if the knight captures, then knight to c3 check is just game over. King to c2, you are getting checkmated. Bishop here, knight to b3, bishop captures, king captures on c3, and now a nice discovery will be checkmate. So it's not possible to capture this bishop, and you have to figure out what to play here. You're down a pawn, and what do you have to show for it? Well, here we have knight captures, and knight captures on d5 would be the way to go. But here, Le played knight to b5. Since this is a classical game, we should discuss what happens if knight captures on d5. It seems like it's great, but still Gukesh would have rook captures on c1, rook captures, and after knight captures and queen captures, bishop to e6. And okay, you won back your pawn, but the bishops are very strong. You can't play something like queen e5 check to try and push the pawn, because we just moved the bishop back and attacked the queen. So it's definitely playable, but it would be black who would have the advantage here. But still, with these pawns so close to the promotion rank, it would be very interesting. But in the actual game, knight to b5 was played, not knight captures on d5. And now, okay, bishop captures on b5, rook captures on c8 first, queen captures, and the bishop captures on b5. But now just bishop back to d6. Gukesh is now up a pawn, and Le has to figure out how to make something out of this. So he goes back bishop to d3. He wants to play g6, give up a pawn, and start advancing the f pawn. We have queen to d7, and of course he goes for it. Pawn to g6, f captures on g6, and now, okay, you could push right away, but he first prepares it. Knight to g5, the f7 square now nicely protected by the knight and by the queen. Queen to a4, a very tricky idea. Point is that if you play something weird, you're gonna get checkmated. If you try something like rook to c1, it does kind of make sense, but well, it actually could be played, because if the d4 pawn is captured, it's perfectly fine. For example, f7 attacks the rook, rook to c8. Now we can capture here, rook captures, knight captures, and knight to e6 now attacks the queen and guards the queening square, and it would be very interesting if this happened, but still nothing all that great. It would be the best hope to save the game, actually. For example, queen e5, we win the bishop, bishop captures, and f8, knight captures, and white is up a bishop, but black is up 4 pawns, so if anything, it would still be Gukesh playing for the win here, regardless of him being down a piece. But in the game, Le rushed it with knight to e6. It's a move you definitely want to play as it guards the queening square, but here it is just too quick because now we have rook to c8, and now things can go very, very bad for white. So here, queen to d1, offering a queen trade, and the Gukesh goes back, queen to d7. Even though the queen trade is winning, but it's, for example, h3, you will get your pawn to h2, f7, pawn to h2. It's very, very tricky to play this, but let's say bishop captures on g6, rook to h8. Now once this rook comes to h1, because you have to put it here to prevent promotion, this rook is out of the game basically forever. So that's one way to do it, but Gukesh has a different idea. Queen to d7, we have queen to g4 now, defending the knight, and now knight to c4, and here white is just dead lost, especially if you play something weird. Let's say you try something like rook to f1, you want to start pushing your pawn, you just get checkmated. Knight d2 check, the rook controls the c file, you have to go to a2 or a1, doesn't really matter, queen to a4 will be checkmate. So that's what Gukesh has in store. But after bishop captures on c4, yes, you've eliminated a very strong attacker, but d captures on c4, what is there for white to play? Rook captures on h4 by Le, but now comes c3. Just opening up the white king. B captures, now queen to b5 with check, king to c2, and the king hunt officially begins. Queen to a4 with check, king to d2, now queen to a2 with check, and it doesn't matter where the white king goes. If you go up the board, then queen to c4 check, king to e4, and now queen to c6 with check. d5, queen captures on c3, and good luck surviving this. There's really nothing you can play. Once you make a move, pretty much anything just wins. Queen e1, now you can't block with the queen because the rook hangs on h4, and if you go king to d3, then rook to c3 will be checkmate. So that doesn't work going up the board. So here instead we have king to d1, but now queen to b3 with check, king to e2, and rook to e8. There's no way to save the knight, so you have to try something. f7 by Le, now rook captures on e6, king to d2, and now even king to c7, just for good measure. You don't have to play it because the bishop covers the queening square, but you know, just making the king a little bit safer. You don't want to blunder the game once you're this close to becoming the fourth youngest 2700 player ever. So rook to h7, now comes queen to b2 with check, king to d3, and queen to b1 with check, king to d2, now comes queen to e1 with check, king to c2, and rook to e2 with check, king b3, here queen to b1 check, and it was in this position on move 49 that Quang Le resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. If you go to a4, then just rook a2 is checkmate, and if you go, what else is there, king to c4, then it's a very quick checkmate, b5 check, king to d5, queen b3 check, only move c4, and queen captures on c4 will be checkmate. So really, really awesome stuff. Now, there's something that I've mentioned in the beginning of the video. Chessbase India published this on Twitter. They said Gukesh becomes the youngest Indian, 6th overall and 3rd youngest in the world to cross 2700, which isn't really true, as Magnus Carlsen tweeted that he's actually the 4th youngest, because Magnus Carlsen, when he was 15 years old, that was in 2006, he played a tournament, and during the tournament he crossed the 2700 barrier, only it wasn't really recorded because in 2006 live ratings wasn't really a thing. It was, you know, only if you actually at the end of the month, once FIDE publishes the official ratings, then it was considered something. But Magnus did break 2700 when he was 15 years old mid tournament, but he did not finish the tournament, you know, on a high note. So he dropped below at the end of the tournament. But yeah, if you guys just you know, straighten this out, as Magnus published it himself on Twitter as a reply to Chessbase India's tweet. But here are the current world rankings. These are the only 2700 players in the world currently on this day that I'm making this, on the 18th of July. So here you can see that Gukesh is now number 33 in the world. He won 20 points in classical rating, so he's 2703.9 on the live rating list. So this is not the official rating, these are the live ratings. If it stays like this until the end of the month, then FIDE will upgrade his rating to a new rating. So I think this is something that's a bit obsolete, because no one really looks at the ratings on a monthly basis. I mean, live ratings we use live ratings everywhere, so making it a monthly thing, I don't think really suits the needs of 2022. But okay, I'm sure FIDE knows what they are doing. But yeah, as you can see, there are 36 2700 players and only two 2800 players. That is Magnus Carlsen and Ding Liren, and Yanni Pomnishi also very, very close after his brilliant performance in the FIDE Candidates Tournament. You can see that he won 26.4 points. That is the absolute most anyone from the 2700 club gained. Gukesh being very close with 19.9 points. But yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys. So yeah, incredible game, incredible achievement. Just with the black pieces, destroying a 2700 Grandmaster with not going for the main lines, nibbling on the sidelines, but it was enough to confuse Le and get this beautiful victory. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Babur Nugmanov, Mago Pink, Alessandro Rigobello, Paul Hinamund, and Alon Labrish for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. The Croatia Grand Chess Tour starts tomorrow. Today is the opening ceremony, but it starts tomorrow. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.